Hey everyone, today I want to talk about something that I have been contemplating doing for a long time, and that is switching to DaVinci Resolve from Premiere Pro. There's always been just enough reasons not to make the switch for me, so I haven't up until this point, but right now, I think for most projects, I will be editing them in DaVinci Resolve. Let me start off with the reasons for the switch. First of all, DaVinci Resolve obviously is very well known for its color grading. Any industry professionals, if they are professional colorists, they are most likely, if not certainly, doing it in DaVinci Resolve. Its color workflow and node structure is just bar to none, just way better than Final Cut or Premiere, especially Premiere. Oh my gosh. Color grading in Lumetri is just a nightmare, and it's definitely just not where it should be for an editing software. And so DaVinci Resolve definitely has a way better structure when it comes to color grading. I also love just how well it's integrated with their editing section of their software. Just the fact that your clips are just showing up in your color panel and you're able to color grade either, just the master timeline. You can set a look for the entire timeline, or you can do it on a clip by clip basis. You can, save power grades that you can refer back to later. You can save stills and apply those to other clips in your project. Just a really intuitive way to color grade, not to mention the tools that you actually have available to make those adjustments. Second of all, Fairlight is DaVinci's Resolve. Essentially, it's their DAW. If you don't know what a DAW is, that's very commonly used as a term in the music industry for the software that you'll use to do your audio production. And Resolve actually essentially has their own DAW built into the software, which is very cool. This is, in my opinion, way superior to Premiere, which their version of this would just be like the audio track mixer, which is a powerful tool, and I'm glad that they do have that in Premiere. But in Resolve, that's essentially on steroids. They actually have all your different tracks. You can apply your different effects. They have, an EQ curve, compression, all of that. That's just, you can easily access that on those tracks. They have buses you can mix to. Some of these things Premiere does have as well, but the build in Resolve is just much superior. It just feels like a well thought out section of the program. It feels intentional. It feels like an actual dedicated DAW, where typically when you're doing bigger productions, you would actually send your audio to a different DAW, whether it be Logic or maybe it's Pro Tools or something like that you would actually do the audio production, scoring, all of that in. Whereas Resolve, it's actually a pretty well built out system that I would feel comfortable doing all of my audio production, sound effects, all of that just straight inside of Resolve. They have the tools available for you to actually do this very effectively. And so that is a big win for me. That is one of the reasons for the switch as well. Being able to easily, have even your presets for your tracks and presets for your master channel, where you can have an actual mastered version and essentially have presets where you can refer back to that later. This is a limitation with Premiere in the audio track mixer. Though you can have presets for individual clips and audio presets for those, when it comes to tracks, you can't have that. You essentially have to apply those effects individually every single time, and just refer to the presets built into Premiere. You can't actually save your own presets and just apply those onto the track itself, whereas in Resolve you can, and this makes it way faster when you have a whole audio track that's just your dialogue, or you have your master channel that you want a specific set of presets for your mastered version. You can actually do that in Resolve, which is pretty cool, and I haven't been able to do that before, and this makes it so much easier to get to a really solid spot when it comes to your audio. Another big win is that when you're exporting from Resolve, your colors actually look accurate from what it looked like in your project. This is just a huge drawback in Premiere, and I think it's really stupid, and I don't know why they have it this way, but in Premiere, it will export your project to essentially like a broadcast color space. And so what you actually have to do is every time you export a project under your effects, you need to apply a LUT on export, and it's this Qt compensation LUT, and essentially converts it to a digital color space. And that is really annoying when you have to do that every single project. Sometimes you forget to do it and then you have to re-export it, or your colors just look a little flat, the saturation is taken away, the contrast is taken away a little bit, and it just looks a little dull in comparison. Whereas I'd never have to deal with that in Resolve. You can just export, and what it looked like in project is what it looks like in the export. And oh my gosh, that is a huge time saver. And it's just an annoyance factor, right? Like it's just a more pleasant experience when it just works and you don't have to go through these loopholes to get it to look the way you want it to look. Another big advantage is I'm often editing 6K RAW files from my Red Komodo. And though you can adjust your RAW video settings in Premiere, it's way easier to do this in DaVinci. In your color grading tab, there's actually a camera raw setting that you can easily just toggle on, and you can adjust all those settings. In Premiere, it's a little convoluted how you have to do this. You go to your effects, then you have to go to the actual master channel rather than the clip channel, and then you can access it. And it's just a few too many steps to get to what you actually want to edit. In Resolve, this is really easy. It's really intuitive. It's all built into the program, which is very, very nice. And another thing is with your color space transform settings in Resolve, it's very, very easy to get your log footage into the right color space. Whether you do it with a master setting in your project or you do it with a node in your color grading, there's multiple ways to do it, but essentially you can use your color space transform without the use of LUTs to easily get your footage from log into the correct color space into Rec 709. Since DaVinci came out with Resolve 18, they fixed one of the things that was really holding me back from switching to this software, and that is simply the fact that in previous versions, you would have your projects, your edit files, stored on what they called your local database. So it would essentially be on your actual computer, and there wasn't really a constructive way to share this. What you would have to do is you would actually have to export a project file and then send that file to someone to share it with them, and then they would be editing off a different version, and then they would have to send it back. Now it'd be the updated version, what have you. It was just very convoluted how you would actually go about this if you had a team or had multiple people or multiple hands on the project. And so what they've done in Resolve 18 is they actually have shared databases. So it's like a network database that you can have, and you can share it with multiple people. And so what I have multiple companies that I run. I have different databases for each of those companies. And so I can share that with the different editors that I have. And so essentially being able to work as a team has become a lot more effective with Resolve 18, where previously it was just very convoluted to do that. And so they finally fixed this issue, and that's really exciting because it means that the software is finally practical to use in my use case. And not that Premiere has this down very well either. At least with Premiere, you could have your project file within a folder structure. So you'd have, your footage and your audio and your edits, your exports, or whatever your folder structure is, and you could send that entire structure to someone. At least they would have everything within a self-contained package. Whereas with Resolve, it wasn't that way. You would have that separation between the edit file and your assets, which still is the case, but at least you have the ability to easily collaborate and share that edit file with other people without having to go into your project, export a version of that edit file, send it to someone. Like, it's just a lot of steps to get there. Whereas now it's very quick, it's very easy. You can share that database and they automatically will have access to all those edit files within that database. Now, there are two things that I am a little worried about when it comes to switching, and I think this will be something that I will probably just edit some projects in Premiere still, and then there will be the majority of projects that I do within Resolve. And here's that comes up. So the first thing is, though Resolve has the Fusion panel, which is essentially their compositing, VFX, side, motion graphics, all of that kind of thing, their version of After Effects essentially built into Resolve. It is fairly decent, and for simple graphics and titles and stuff like that, it's really easy to use. And even when it comes to basic compositing, they have they have a 3D tracker and all these things built in, which is really, really nice. One, it's a bit of a learning curve, but that's not really a valid excuse, so let's not use that. But it is a little bit more rudimentary in comparison to what you can do with After Effects. After Effects still, I don't think there's many programs that can compete just with the versatility and just, depth of work that you can actually actually do within it. And so there are projects that maybe there's a little bit more heavy animation in the project, or compositing or VFX or what have you. Those projects I think I will still probably do in Premiere, just because of the dynamic link function where Premiere and After Effects talk to each other. It's very convenient the way that those two softwares actually work together. That is something that Adobe has down, though it does slow down quite a bit when you have those dynamic links. It does help when, especially if you have like revision rounds from clients, just making sure that everything works, that it talks to each other, that everything's linking properly. That is really important. And if you're working in After Effects and then working in Resolve, and you're exporting, these alpha channels and then bring those into your project and making sure those are up to date, it just gets very messy very fast. Whereas in Premiere, it's a little bit more organized and just up to date, and it makes sense. So I think for those projects, I'll still edit those in Premiere and just opt to do a different platform for those specific projects. The other aspect is syncing, and Resolve does have a sync function. You can pretty easily, drag clips into the timeline, right click or select them, right click, go align to waveform, and it does work pretty well. Where it starts to get bugged up is when you have a lot of different clips. When you have multiple audio clips, multiple video clips, you're trying to do a multicam out of it, and maybe it's not just like one cohesive section of recording. Maybe there's audio and you're recording for this section, then you stopped recording, then you started recording again, and there's all these different pieces that it has to kind of interpret. Sometimes it'll get it, sometimes it won't, and I don't like that inconsistency. And something that I really liked about Premiere is that a program called Pluralize worked really well integrated with Premiere. And so you can actually bring in this extension called Pluralize. It will sync everything directly in Premiere. Now you can use Pluralize as well, and you can sync it all in there and then bring it into Resolve if you would like. But that's another step, right? You have to use a certain program just to sync everything, and then you bring it into Resolve, and it's just a bit complicated that way. Whereas in Premiere, it was just a panel you could bring up, you could easily drag your clips onto the timeline, and then you would just sync using Pluralize all internally within the program, and it would work like 99.5% of the time. Just very consistent results. Very rarely would I have issues with this, no matter how complicated a situation you would throw at it. And I will definitely miss that going to Resolve. And so there's certain projects where I'm not sure yet if I'm fully gonna switch. Like weddings is a very clear example of that for me, where especially for like a ceremony or a reception, you have all these moving parts for your long form edits, right? You have maybe like 3-4 camera angles in some cases, and these long audio clips and different sections throughout the event where your video will be syncing to your audio. And it's just a little bit more of a complicated situation to sync, and I don't know how Resolve is really going to be able to handle that, and if I can rely on it to handle that consistently. And so maybe Premiere might be the right solution for something like a wedding. And so these are things that I'm going to just start to try out, see where I fall in regards to what kind of projects I'm gonna edit in what software. But I would say for most cases, I think Resolve is going to be the tool of choice for me. It's going to be the software of choice. And so, like anything, you have to kind of select the right tool for the job. It's the same with cameras, right? There's not one camera that's going to fit every single project. You have to evaluate what the specific needs are for that project and then use the tools that are going to most effectively accomplish that task. And I would say that that's the same for editing software in some ways. Obviously, it is easier when you have an infrastructure and a workflow within one software. But like I said, there might be certain projects where Premiere actually is the right call, or Final Cut's the right call, or Resolve's the right call. And so that's, I think, the way I'm gonna go about it. I think Resolve from this point will be the default. That will be the program that I reach for. That is just my automatic response. But then there will be certain projects where just specifically I decide to use Premiere instead for the unique advantages that that program has as well. Well, that's all that I got for you. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of insight into my personal thought process switching to DaVinci, or at least for the most part switching to DaVinci. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, hopefully you learned something, and I will see you in the next one.